Hi, everybody. I see a couple people. We're just going to give it a few minutes for some others to join if they want to. Everybody hear me okay? Can hear me? Okay, cool. If you're just joining us, I'm going to get started in a couple minutes, just giving some folks more time to join. In the meantime, though, you can use the Q&A feature because we're going to do a Q&A at the end. So hit me with some of your burning photo questions and I've got you covered. We'll give it a couple more. Just let some people trickle in. And if you're using the Q&A, we're going to do a section at the end. So hold on to your answers for now. Cool. Okay. I think with that song being over, we can go ahead and jump right into things. So yeah, hi, hello. I'm Sarah. I'm FemHouse's newest educator here. I'm gonna bring you the secret sauce of music photography today. This is my first online course with FemHouse, so please just bear with me if there's any technical difficulties or anything, but we should be all set. So FemHouse, if you're new here, is a nonprofit that provides resources to femmes and non-binary people to have a platform in music. In the past, this has been producing and DJing, but now I'm really honored and excited that FemHouse asked me to launch the media side of things. Since there's so many people out there who do music photography, there's also just as many people who want to learn. So it only seemed fitting. This is Behind the Lens. Welcome. It's a 4-part series designed to get your foot in the door. And maybe you've never shot a show, maybe you want to know how to start, maybe you've shot plenty, but you want to learn how to turn this into a real paying career, then this class right here is for you. I just want to add a little disclaimer that everything that I'm about to share comes from my personal journey. There's so many different avenues that you can go down to get into this field. So today's class is not an end-all be-all, but rather just my experience of getting into the field and then rising through the ranks, climbing the ladder to the point where I'm able to talk to you here now. You'll want a basic understanding of how to use your camera, since this isn't a technical skills course, but in later classes, I think number 3, we're going to go over specific camera settings to use for different things that you will encounter during a show. This first class is going to be a bit of a mini session. We'll have longer ones down the line that are more hands-on. But for now, we're going to cover the ins and outs and the basics of how to actually get the gig. And then again, before we really get into it, I just wanted to say the end, we're going to do a Q&A. So be sure to utilize the Q&A feature. It's down there somewhere in Zoom land. I don't know what it looks like on your screen, but it should be there because I have a couple questions that have come through already. So yeah, because this is a 4-part course, I just wanted to give a little breakdown of everything that you can expect, because maybe today is a little basic for you, but maybe there's something down the line that you want to learn that we're going to cover. So today we're going to talk about different types of gigs, how to land them, how to start getting paid, how much to charge, and then like what the expectations are when you shoot a show. Class number 2, we're going to have on-site workflow, professionalism versus just being a hobby, and then etiquette once you're actually on that stage, how to conduct yourself, what should you do, problems, solutions, you know, all the things that are going to throw at you in the world of live music. Course 3 is probably going to be my favorite. I'm such a little tech gadget gear nerd. You might learn down the line. We're going to talk about all of the different things out there to make your life easier while you're actually shooting, gear must-haves, helpful things that will, be good to have in the field. And then I'm going to demo some software and really show you how I personally edit my photos and turn a raw image into a piece of art at the end. And the last class is going to apply previous workshop topics. Really going to show you how to make this a long-lasting career, how to do your self-marketing, how to build relationships, and then, going down other avenues that photography can lead you to. Like suddenly I'm a graphic designer now, and I didn't know I was going to get there, but photography took me there. So we'll show you how. And I'm just going to give a little pause to let people ask some questions if they have any. If at any point the mic cuts out or anything, just use the Q&A to let me know. So a little bit about me. I'm Sarah. Professionally, I'm known as my Instagram handle, which is Sar Takes Pics. I made it when I was 15 and I never changed it, so here we are. Currently, I'm LP Giobbe's tour photographer and the social media manager for her record label, Yes, Yes, Yes. I'm also an admin of No Travel Agency, which is a global online Discord community for specifically EDM media. And it's also a bit of an educational platform where we teach people how to do what we do. And then a fun fact, I've been published in DJ Mag, EDM.com, Revolver, and then from my college days as a journalism undergrad in CNN and USA Today. Now let's talk about the origin story for me, because this is just one of many paths that you can go down. But I found that my origin story as a press photographer working for my college newspaper is something that actually has applied to a lot of people in my field. The press photographer to paid artist photographer pipeline is very, very real. So I'll share how I ended up sitting in this chair talking to you now. I've always done art. I really liked drawing and painting, and I did that when I was a kid. When I was 10 or 11, my parents got me this little like point and shoot Canon camera. I mean, it was smaller than this phone, honestly. But I took it on vacations, hikes, cringy middle school dances. They had just come out with Instagram at this time, so like I just took this camera everywhere, posted everything, and I never went anywhere without it for years and years. I realized that I really, really liked photography and that I was better at it than drawing and painting. So I stuck with it and I never looked back. And then cut to college. I graduated the University of Oregon with a bachelor's degree in journalism, emphasis on photojournalism. And although I believe that I didn't really need my college degree to do what I love to do today, I definitely took advantage of hands-on opportunities that were there, namely the student paper. And this is like where I actually really found that music photography was a real thing. I have my teenage obsession with Lorde to thank for where I am today. Because I was broke in college and I really wanted to see her in concert. And someone suggested that maybe I could take my photo skills and offer them as like a trade for tickets or something. I didn't think that it would ever be possible. And then I learned about the world of press photography, which we'll talk about in a sec, because that's actually a big part of this course is getting into photography through press photography. But I realized that I could join the student paper and get a position there for access to shows. So I worked there for a year and I had to shoot everything from sports to political rallies to just regular little towny events. And then eventually I told my boss that I was deserving of a photo pass. And I did shoot the Lorde show. The photos were really bad, but I did it. And then I continued to work for the paper to shoot concerts and everything in between for the rest of the 4 years that I was in school. And I eventually became the lead of the photo team there. And I met a lot of the people in my journey and got started that way as a press photographer. So some artists that I got to shoot this way, obviously Lorde, Dua Lipa, Billie Eilish. Let's see here on this little portfolio. And I'm adding this just so you can see and kind of get a feel for what I'm about. We have Travis Scott on here, Grizz, Anderson .Paak. I did a lot more than EDM in my press days, but I mainly work in EDM now. And I'm going to give a little pause just in case anyone wants to add to the Q&A. So eventually I built a strong enough portfolio through my press gigs that I started having locals ask me to shoot for them. This turned into venues then hiring me. It turned into getting press passes to festivals, meeting artists like LP Giobbi, and the rest is history. So we've heard me talk about press. Here's what that actually means, as well as some other ways to shoot. There are so many different avenues. I managed to sort of hone in on what, in my opinion, is the big three. So the first is the press pass. And what this means is you work for a publication. You'll hear people also call it an outlet. And this is going to be a magazine, a newspaper. If those sound like too big of an entity for someone who's just starting out, rest assured there's tons of like really small indie online only publications that have been created solely for the purpose of getting photo passes to concerts. Just, start Googling in your area and something will come up. Or feel free to hit me up after this and I can recommend some to you. This work is usually for free unless the publication pays you as an employee or a contractor. It's rare, but it does happen. I had a publication reach out to me to cover a band, I think it was Tool, coming through Eugene, Oregon, which is where I live. And the rule for the show was one song, and I got paid to do one song. So not a bad night. But typically you'll get more than one. If you've ever heard the phrase like first three, no flash, that usually is in reference to press photography. So that typically means you get to shoot the first three songs from the photo pit, which is the area between the crowd barricade where the rail riders are, and then the actual stage. There's like a little pit where they put all the photographers. And at small venues, sometimes there's no pit. You kind of just have to like elbow your way to the front. But most of the time there will be one, and that's where you'll be doing a lot of your work if you are a press photographer. The objective here is to, capture the experience of the show with your news hat on, with your journalist hat on. What are the things about the show that are unique to your city, where the whole tour might be the same show everywhere it goes, but what are the things that's really going to make it special for your community. So when I shot as press, I tried not just to get as many photos of the band in 3 songs as possible, but also if someone at the front of the crowd has a sign that says like, it's my birthday, play my favorite song, you know, something like that, that's a really unique part of the experience that you would want to capture as press. And my advice, if you find your way into a press pass, is to just shoot as long as the limitations allow. A lot of times you'll have 3 songs in the pit and then you are allowed to shoot the rest of the show outside in the crowd. Definitely take advantage of that, because the faraway photos can be just as cool as the ones that are up close. You know, artist visuals, the lighting, the stage design, all of that's really important. And I think, you know, an early on mistake that some people make is they get so focused on the access and shooting as close to the artist as possible when you can actually make use of just the fact that you are allowed there with your camera. So next we have a venue promoter, and these are 2 different things that are also sort of one and the same. The venue, if you've ever heard the term, like you work for the house, that's the venue hosting the show. If you're not as familiar with promoters, that's who's booking and throwing the show inside the venue. And often venues and promoters work in tandem or they're owned by the same person. Sometimes they're completely separate. So what that means is working for one promoter might not necessarily mean only working under one venue or under one roof. It could mean working for a bunch of different venues. But if you're the house photographer at a particular venue, separate from a promoter, then you would just be working in that venue. And unlike press photography, these gigs usually, mostly, should be always paid. Um, you know, and budgets are different, and we're going to talk about rates and budgets and all that fun stuff, you know, a little bit down the line here. But for now, I'm sort of just breaking down the different types of gigs that I'm going to reference in today's class. And then lastly, we have my favorite one, which is what I do, and that's artist media. And that is when you are basically an artist's personal photographer, whether that's for the day, for the hour, you know, for life, if you're homies. But you're gonna highlight a singular artist or band's performance and experience at a show. You're gonna want to cater to their current objectives. So is there a new song? Are there cool outfits to show off? Are, you know, maybe a band has gone along an entire tour and they realize that all of these photos are from the same angle, so we need something different. They're going to come to you and say, hey, can you shoot this differently? And that's sort of what the artist side of things is really playing into what their current promotional needs are at the time. And then this one, like venues and promoters, is paid. And that's really awesome because we like making money when we're trying to have successful careers. So I know that was kind of a big info dump. I'm just going to take a sec if anyone wants to drop some Q&As. I'm basically just going to talk a bit and then leave room for questions that we'll get to at the end. So now that we know what the big 3 types of gigs are, I'm going to share the bread and butter of how to get hired and ideally paid. My biggest piece of advice here is to start local and go bigger. Solicit local bands to build a portfolio if you're having trouble getting access. It's always that, like, you know, that common paradox of how can I get a job if I don't have experience? It's how can I get hired for gigs if I don't have a portfolio? So this is a really tried and true way. Local bands are awesome. They're usually stoked to have someone interested going to their show, wanting to photograph them. You might have to work for free, because, you know, a lot of the times local bands, they're not getting paid that much. Um, and I would say try to get paid something, even if it's just like $50. It sets a precedent that this is a job and this is work. but also be understanding if like a band truly cannot afford that at the local level. I would say just make sure you set their expectations accordingly. And then once you've worked your way up from that local level, and you've built a pretty solid portfolio just on photos of local artists, which by the way, like if I'm someone who's hiring and I see a portfolio that just has really artistic, cinematic, personal photos where I can really see you shine through as an individual, I don't care who the artist is. I don't care if the artist in the photo is Taylor Swift or like, I don't know, Chappell Roan, like any of like the really big artists right now. I care more about, as someone who's doing hiring, what the actual quality of your portfolio is. And if that's only local bands, that's completely okay. Because it's about the heart of the photo and the quality of the photo and not who's in it. Once you have built that portfolio though, this is the real secret sauce. And it's the cold email. And take a screenshot, copy paste, do whatever you need to save this, because this is going to be the key that will unlock many, many doors for getting hired for gigs. And I'm going to give a second just to pause, let you guys read this, and then I'll get in and I'll break it down. Okay. So, if you do use this, just a little disclaimer, because we're all here, we're all getting the same little message. Try to change up the wording, keep the format the same, but definitely try to change the wording so suddenly there's not a bunch of artists getting the same email over and over again. You don't want to look like spam. But even from the get-go, in the subject line, it's really, really important that you have all of this information. And that's going to be media in all caps, the artist's name at the venue in the city on the date. So, for example, for me, that might look like media LP Giobbi at Roseland Theater, Portland, Oregon on January 20th. And the reason that you want all of that info in the subject line is because a manager or a publicist or whoever is on the receiving end of this email, first of all, gets like hundreds of emails daily. So you want yours to stand out with the media in all caps. I wouldn't make the whole subject all caps, but at least the part about media. And then have all of the information in one place so that if someone is working on the show on their back end and they type it into their email because they have to pull something up to search for it, your email will come up if you have the venue, the artist name, and the date in there. And it's also just helpful to have it all in one place. So, if you do get access, all of your information is already there for the show that you want to attend. And then also it just makes a manager or a publicist's life easier. They don't have to ask you any follow-up questions. The more back and forth that you spend is just less of a chance that you will land the gig. And that same principle applies through the rest of the email as well. So it is very important, how to word things and what information to include. I'll say, hey, manager name. My name is Sarah, and I'm a music photographer based in Portland, Oregon. Bonus points if it's the same city, because that tells you that you're local and you will, show up, you'll be there on time. They don't have to pay you for gas or anything. I saw that your client will be playing at the venue in the city on the date again and wanted to offer my services to shoot the show if you're looking to hire media. And the wording here about looking to hire media is really important, because if you're trying to get paid, you want to imply that this is paid work. I think a couple times, maybe even when I was first starting out utilizing this method, I made the mistake of just saying like, I would love to shoot the show. And some teams will then assume that you're talking about maybe just like a free photo pass, a press pass. And if you want to make this a career and you want to get paid, it is really important to distinguish that you are looking to be hired as a professional and not just get hooked up with a pass to go build your portfolio. If you are using this template to reach out for press, because that world is usually free and because the person that you would be emailing is not the one who would be paying you, you can leave that part out, and you can also leave the second part out as well. The second part is about your deliverables, and we're going to talk about specifically what all of this means in a little bit here. But you want everything that you're going to provide all in one place in this email. So how many photos, how many video clips, and then I like to do portraits when I'm photographing an artist because honestly, I probably would anyway, and it just adds on to like what they're getting when they hire me. And also it helps build my portrait portfolio, which isn't as strong because I mainly do music. So it's just a way for me to throw in some extra stuff in there, and you totally can too. And then what your turnaround is, so that's how quickly you're getting them photos. And then what your rate is. Just be open about it. Don't worry about playing the game. Well, if I ask for too much, I won't get hired. You know, if you ask for what you believe you deserve, you will get exactly that, you know, or at close to it. If someone, you know, if your rate is higher than what someone can do, but it's not completely out of their ballpark, there is room for negotiation there, and that definitely will happen. I think a lot of people get scared to ask for what they want to make from a shoot because they're afraid of getting turned down from the shoot. But just leave the door open. If someone comes back and says that they can't do your rate, you know, ask them what would work for them and see if you can adjust your turnaround or your deliverables from there to make it worth it to you to accept that much money for a shoot. And then I have at the end here, you know, if you're interested, you can view my portfolio here. And then just make sure to have the link. And Instagram is fine. But I would definitely say if you can build a portfolio, definitely do it. It can even just be like a free Wix or Squarespace site, but just something to show that you have a little extra like professional zhuzh to you. And if there's any questions on this, because I know it was a lot, just feel free to put them in the Q&A and we'll keep on going. One thing to note with what this email is going to or who is going to, for artists, you'll want to hit up their managers. For promoters or venues, you will want to contact their direct emails that you can usually find on like a website. Usually you can't go wrong with info at and then typing in the website domain. And then for press, you'll want to contact publicists. Though remember, for press, the publicist is not going to be paying you, so you can leave your deliverables and all of that out. It's really just the first paragraph if you're trying to reach out for a press pass. And that said, if you aren't attached to a publication and you have a good portfolio, reach out for that press pass anyway, because I've been unattached from a publication. And sometimes if I want to shoot a show for fun, I'll just ask for a press pass. And, you know, depending on who the artist is, sometimes they'll give it to me even if I'm not like with anybody. And how to find these contacts, like a quick Google search, 80% of the time will do it. Artist Facebook page, artist websites, usually have managers, booking, and publicists on there. If you're reaching out for a press pass and you can't find a publicist, one of my little handy tricks is if you type in the artist name and then press release into Google, then their press releases like from the publicists will like appear as like PDFs or any sort of downloadable file, and they'll have contacts at the end of them for who to contact. If you find booking info, don't use that because they're they're not in our world. They're not going to be able to help you. It's going to have to go to a manager if you hit up a booking agent, and most of the time they probably will just ignore your email. Got some good questions coming in. I'm excited to get to these. So now that we've talked about all that, we're going to fill in some of those X's that you saw in the email template. How much do you charge and what those expectations and what those deliverables are. And just to keep things organized, I'm going to break it down by press, venue, and artist like we've been doing. So for press pricing, usually nothing. Usually it is normal to work for free as press, and it's totally fine to work for free as press. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I think my main objective here is just to provide you with the tools if you want to make this a livable career where you can pay your rent. At some point, you're gonna have to, stop doing press photography. But once you've built up enough of a portfolio, it's pretty easy to get into other worlds. We'll turn in your photos to your editor, which is basically like a boss, and they'll put them online. The turnaround for that is typically about 24 to 48 hours. For most of these, actually, you're looking at about 24-hour turnaround. For press, the stakes aren't as higher. You can get away with, 48 hours, 72 hours. But in the world of live events, it's really important just also algorithmically for people's interest to get things out as close to the event happening as possible. Because by next week, people have moved on to other things. There's other concerts on the weekend, and your photos are not gonna be as relevant and as shareable as they once were. So try to always get those turned around as fast as you can, even if you're shooting a show for press. And a little pro tip too is I always try to send the link to the publicist that got me the pass once it's gone up online. It's a way to show that you follow through. It's also a way to form a more memorable relationship with them. There's been a few times actually where maybe the press list, which is how many tickets they've allocated for press, is like really small. Maybe it's a high interest show. I think one time there was only 4 press passes available, and there was a publicist that I had formed more of like an email relationship with through just following through with things, sending links. And he was more than happy to give me one of the 4 passes to shoot Billie Eilish's first ever arena show in Portland, Oregon. Um, so just a little pro tip if you're in that world. For venues and promoters, the pricing is going to depend on the size of the venue, which is how many tickets that they can sell and not like how big the venue is. But in my experience, rates have ranged from $250 for an entire evening, for like a typical size venue that you would go to, anywhere up to $100 an hour for the shoot time, the editing time, and your driving time, for like bigger venues like arenas and stuff. But you do just have to factor how big is the venue that's hiring you? What can they realistically do? If it's a 200 person capacity room, they're probably not going to be able to reach that 250 unless they're charging like $100 for tickets. So just being aware. And the expectations there are showcasing for the promoter and the venue. It's more about capturing the hype of the experience. You're going to want to show what it's like to be a person in the crowd. If you're shooting for a club, bottle service, VIP tables, you are going to focus somewhat on the act for sure, because, they paid all this money to book the act. They want to showcase that act on their Instagram. But the more usable content that a lot of venues will ask for is asking people to take, photos of friends hanging out in the crowd, or just like big atmospheric shots of the venue, and things that really encapsulate what your particular experience at that venue is like. So just be prepared to shoot maybe less of the artist and more of the evening as a whole. And then delivery for that, is going to be as close to next day as you can. I typically do 24 hours. Some places want by 12 p.m. the next day. You know, that's that same concept of social media shelf life. In this day and age, it's very, very fast. So being able to like stay up all night and edit is going to be really important. Which is something that I struggle with because I'm a little sleepy girl. I like to take a nap, go to bed at the end of the night. And because I work in EDM, sometimes I don't always get to do that. A lot of the shows go well past 2 in the morning. And then the last one for this section of pricing and deliverables is the artist side of things. And that's going to be price wise, the average I've seen anywhere from 250 on the low end for maybe like an opener of a show or someone who's, closer to the bottom of like a poster on a lineup, upwards of $600 for your tier one headliners. In the effort of full transparency for the level that my portfolio and experience is at, I charge $500 a set. But the sweet spot, I would say, for a lot of people that I have seen is 350 when you send that email and ask an artist manager if you can shoot the show. And then local rates, for your local acts, your local openers, people who are in the magnifying glass print of a festival poster, you're looking closer to like 150, 250. So just keep this in mind as you reach out to people. This is kind of an estimate of what you would want to be asking for. And you can, if you're a fan of the artist or familiar with their work, I'm sure that you can decide who is a headliner, who's local. In all three of these cases, the biggest piece of advice that I have is to know your worth. Understand the amount of hours, the shoot time, the editing, the travel, and not just time, but also the cost of your gear, the cost of your software. All of that has to be factored into your pricing. And the beautiful thing about freelance work is you can always say no if something isn't worth the effort. And I know that can seem hard at first because when you're first starting out, it's like really exciting and you just want to get to the gig. But if your goal is to get paid and something isn't worth your time, you don't have to say yes. And you also, if you want to say yes anyway, you also don't have to provide like the full scope of what you would normally provide. You can always communicate and say, hey, this is usually less than what I charge, but here's what I can offer instead, and reduce your deliverables and increase your turnaround time if need be. At the same time, you don't want to be charging $500 as someone who is brand new, unless you're just like an undeniable prodigy, and in that case, like pop off queen. But I I haven't really seen that yet. But then my other pro tip for this little section is to always discuss your expectations before the gig so that deliverables and the turnaround are made clear. This way, there's no surprises for you. This way, there's no surprises for the person hiring you. And this could mean, hey, here's how many photos I provide, here's when you can expect them, and laying all that out in advance as you will do in your email if you follow it, if you follow the template that I put in here, is going to be really important. I've even sent my cold email template and then had an artist ask me to do 12-hour turnaround. And I said, hey, that's actually not something that I offer. And I'm really glad that we talked about it before the show because I would have hated to go home, go to bed, and then, have someone texting me and saying, where are my photos? Um, so always discuss the expectations beforehand. And even when you get to the show, if you're working directly for the artist, talk to them, find out, hey, are there any songs that you have out right now that you want clips of? Anything specifically that one question is going to go a long way. Just asking an artist that you're working for what they need that night. It's gonna go a long way to making you seem really put together and like the professional that you are or you are becoming. Give a little break for the Q&A section, and then we'll keep going in just a sec. And if you joined us halfway, we're gonna do the Q&A at the end of everything, just so I can get to your questions all at once. But I have them coming in here, so I think the box is somewhere at the bottom. So as I mentioned, I do a lot of work in the dance music scene. If you're familiar with FemHouse, then you know that FemHouse mainly caters to the dance music scene. But there is a whole other world of music photography in DJs versus bands. And they have their different little isms and their different little quirks. Whichever genre you are shooting, it's going to have its own subculture, not just within the fans, but also within the photography and the etiquette and the different things that are involved. So I personally have found way more saturation in EDM for paid work than with bands. I think if you think about it, it kind of makes sense because if you have a band, you have like at least two or more people, plus instruments, plus roadies, instrument techs, a lot of different people involved in making the production. And then that single booking fee is getting split out to everybody involved, right? So in most cases, and I don't want to generalize, but in most cases with DJs, you're taking a flight. It's either you and a tour manager and your USB and the decks are ready for you and you plug in and you play your set, right? So there's less involved and there's less hands sort of in the cookie jar, which leaves more budget to hire media. And I think that's part of it. I also think that another part of it is the subculture around dance music and EDM is a lot more like hype. It's a lot more showy with, the video clips, iPhone videos, social media. Some bands, if you look at like I don't know, like Lorde or like Paramore, for instance, like they do like their obligations on social media and then they just tune out and they tune the world off. And if you look at, DJs' Instagrams, it's all about like where you are, what you're doing, what song you're playing, and it's so hype. It only makes sense that there is more of a need and a demand for photographers and videographers to capture that content that is being posted. That said, you still can work with bands, and I have worked with bands, and I have very good friends who work with bands. You might just be looking at a little bit harder of an entry and maybe some initially lower offers just because there really is not as much of an available budget for it, but it does exist. You just kind of have to find your corner in the market. Um, some other differences are the types of content that are needed. I think, I talked a little bit about having more active social media generally on the DJ side, but also like the content. I don't think I've ever had a band ask me for video once. I think I even had a band ask me to not do video because I had video written in my cold email. DJs, on the other hand, I think every single DJ that I've ever been reached out to photograph has wanted, video clips, raw clips. So if you're not familiar, when you saw in that cold email template, a raw clip is a video that has not been cut and edited into a bigger piece. You can colorize it, you can trim it, minimal editing, but you're not going to turn it into like a larger product. And so for DJs, the raw clip really is the holy grail right now. And that's like a 30-second to 1 minute clip of them playing a track. That bands just they really don't ask for it and they don't need it. But if you provide it, more power to you. So another difference is stage etiquette, which we'll talk more about in Behind the Lens #2. But keeping in mind, like with EDM, you're gonna do a lot more work on stage. Whereas with bands, if you're shooting for the artist, you will still have stage access in some cases, but it's not always a guarantee. It might be side stage, it might be restricted in some aspect. It kind of just depends on like the production, how many members, how much they have going on, you know, and then also your own comfort level. But it is much more common in dance music to be like physically on the stage with your camera, which can be a little terrifying at first, but you get used to it. And I say all of this here too, because I want you to think about what photos you want to take, what access you want to have. And with bands and DJing, it can be two very different sides of the same coin. I'll give a little pause so people can fill out the Q&A if you want. You don't have to. With the last little bit of time that we have here in the main secret sauce dump, I just want to give some pro tips, you know, some things that I wish that I had that when I was starting out, that I really would love to share with you all here, because I want to help this journey. I want to inspire this journey. Um, and these are just little tidbits that I think would be very valuable to hang on to. The first being, know your camera, or learn your camera, learn how to use it. It doesn't have to be the best camera, it just has to be a camera. But the more technical skill you have, the more practice you know, the more practice you have, the stronger your portfolio of work will be. Technical skill, practice, composition, all those things in tandem, you will become an unstoppable force, I promise. And you'll also just, it helps with your confidence when you're shooting as well, to like actually really know what you're doing. You might be thrown into your first concert ever and it's really overwhelming, but as long as you know how to use your camera, you can be like, okay, it's just like anything else I've ever photographed. Just pretend you're photographing your dog and your dog is on stage singing to you. Um, Shoot everything for fun, even if it's not music. Anything that you can to just get that practice in, I think is really, really valuable. And for a couple years, I still kind of do it, but there's this game that I like to play where if I see something that makes me happy, I just take my phone out and I take a picture of it. And it doesn't have to be a really good picture, but it teaches like moment seeking for a photo, for a good opportunity, for something that elicits, you know, art, emotion, a reaction, or maybe just for me, but it helps me and it will help you get into the habit of just like learning what to look for. Um, and it's also just really, really good practice. So we'll go over specific camera skills for music in class number 3, but for now, you know, just really try to practice. Don't have any expectations. You're not going to be on tours right away. I'm sorry to say. That's okay. You're going to get comfortable with that. You're going to cut your teeth, you're going to earn your grit, and you're going to start small, and that snowball will roll as long as you continue to push outside of your comfort zone. I promise. Just don't have any expectations going into it, and you might find yourself in some of the coolest places. With that said, you know, as silly as this sounds, avoid clout chasing the best you can. This is a really, really, really cool field, but you know, try to still stay humble. Focus on the areas that you enjoy and hone in on them. It's about the moment more and the artistic value of the photos and not about who is in them. I would say don't get caught up trying to shoot the biggest artist. This is, you know, sometimes this can hold you back. If you're really focused on only getting, you know, access that's out of reach to the biggest artists in the world, of course you're not going to find yourself shooting a lot of shows, because the biggest artists, they have their people, right? So it's, again, it's that concept of like start small and work your way up. And like also be humble, be kind, be professional, just be yourself. So many artists out there, from locals to headliners, would rather hire people that they enjoy working with and being around. rather than having like the number one best, most famous followed Instagram photographer ever, it's at the end of the day, it's who as an artist am I going to want to be spending my time with when I'm cramped on a tour bus? Who do I want? Do I want someone who has an ego through the roof, or do I want someone who's a good hang? Do I want someone who complements my personality? All of those things to consider. And the first few people that you shoot, you might not find that you click with them. I've definitely shot for artists that I haven't personally felt connected to. And then, you'll encounter like what for me is like the LP Giobis of the world, where all of a sudden I'm like, wow, I really vibe with this person, and our energies feed really well off of each other. And just nurture those relationships like they're little babies, even if it's a really small artist, because you never know. One day they could be the next big thing, and you will have been part of that journey. So work hard, work at your own pace. And I think I might have mentioned earlier, but like sleepless nights are part of the job. If you get into like really heavily touring the artist side of things, sleeping on airport floor. I've done it a couple times now. You know, it's it might not always be so glamorous, but it is still really fun. You just gonna want to be prepared to edit till the sun comes up, or break your back with a 50-pound camera bag, and it's part of the job, but I love it. At the end of the day, when I'm sore and like I finally climb into bed at like 4 in the morning after shooting an EDM gig at a nightclub, I'm like, dang, that was pretty fun. And then you have these really cool photos to show for it, and hopefully a career that will be founded on nights like those. In this day and age of Instagram, another side of working hard is seeing people who work hard as well. And I just like, you might have heard this all before, but like, don't compare yourself to others that you see on social media. It might be a cliche, but I also really believe in it. I know that it's hard. But rather than saying like don't do that, I would say instead utilize the people that you see working hard, utilize people who maybe have more experience than you, utilize people who are your peers. Use them as a resource and not a reflection of your own progress. I think a really beautiful thing about music photography is that it is very community based, and there are people like me out there who just want to share what we know, and how to do things or help you get access to gigs. So instead of looking at people, you know, as something that you're not, use them as a resource for something that you could be. And go ahead, and if you have any more questions, put them in the Q&A. I know that was a lot of like musings and stuff, but I do think that, you know, if you are able to take some of that advice to heart, it will definitely help you in your journey. So the last little bit here before we get to the Q&A, I just wanted to say, I touched on the fact that like this can be a hard job, but it can also be a really fun job. And I think it's important to appreciate where you'll end up along the way. It's not always fun and games and free concert access, but it definitely for sure is not a boring job. I love this field. I feel really lucky to be a part of it. And sometimes it can seem really overwhelming. It seems overwhelming sometimes now even, and I'm sure, you know, for any of you folks who are just starting out, like this is a lot of information to take a hold of. Like it can definitely be overwhelming. My biggest piece of advice there is to just take it one day at a time. This isn't something that happens all at once. It takes a couple years if you want to really, really rise and go on tours and, the world's biggest festivals. You're going to be doing this for a while, and it's going to be a fun while because music is freaking awesome. But it's also like music photography is becoming more and more of a common practice. When I first started, it took me a lot longer to get here because it wasn't as common, it wasn't as talked about, and it was definitely like a lot more of an enigma. There was way less accessibility early on, than there is now. And what's really, really cool is some people these days, in my circle that I've seen, they're starting out and within the year they're getting booked on tours because they're following a similar path to the one that I'm outlining here. And they're really putting in the work and the passion. And like, that's incredible. I've been doing, I think specifically music photography since about 2017. I didn't start getting paid till 2021, and I didn't go on my first tour for another 2 years in 2023. So things like this really didn't exist, and I wish that they had. And I want to make sure that all of you tuned in now can get there too. So if you want it, go for it. And feel free to reach out to me afterwards on Instagram, email, if you have any other questions that you didn't want to put in the Q&A. But in just a sec, I'm gonna dive into the Q&A and answer anything that I haven't yet. So thank you for being part of First Behind the Lens. Okay, so here we have first question is, how did I first meet LP? And if you don't know who LP Giobbi is, she's one of the co-founders of FemHouse. She's also a really badass producer, DJ, icon. But yeah, how I first met LP is really cool, and it kind of ties into this press to artist photographer pipeline that I've been talking about. I again was really broken in college and I wanted to go to Snow Globe Music Festival. If you don't know where Snow Globe was, it was in Lake Tahoe, and I live in Eugene, Oregon. So it was 10 hours away, but I thought, hey, maybe I'll reach out and ask for a press pass, which is, it's probably going to be a long shot because I live nowhere in the area. Like, why would people in Eugene care about press reporting on the Snow Globe? But somehow I got a press pass. And when you get press passes to music festivals, your contact information gets put on a list that publicists will reach out to. And so I got reached out to by LP's publicist at the time and said, hey, like, here's my client. She's playing the stage. Do you want to interview her? And I wrote back and I said, hey, I don't write. I'm not a reporter, but I will take like portraits of her at the festival. And so that's what I did. And we connected at Snow Globe. I found out that her hometown is where I currently live, and went to school, and we bonded over that. And I've just been like shooting with her ever since. I think the first couple of gigs since meeting her in 2019, I kept in touch. I saw that she was going to be in the area. I asked to come out and shoot. I shot for free. And then she really liked the shots. And then eventually, like, she and her team kept having me back eventually until, the work was paid and I had grown. She had grown a lot as an artist. And now I tour with her when she goes on her headline tours. And then also a lot of the festivals that are in my region as well. So that's that story. It's the press to artist pipeline, and it's one of my favorite stories. What are some things I wish I knew at the beginning of my photo career? I think a lot of what I had just talked about in the last section here. I'm trying to think of anything else, but that entire section was built on things that I wish that I knew. Um, if there's anything else I have to add to that, I would say like don't be afraid of competition. Try to reframe other photographers and don't look at them as like your competition as much as your peers because you're all in this together. And if you really like lean on music photography as a community, there's so much just like value in that. I've gotten gigs from, my peers who maybe they can't make it out to their own. I've had people, have me out to a gig just to like come hang out and I get to take photos and I do the same thing for people as well and say, let people in, definitely, and make use of the fact that music photography is a community these days. Is it common practice for photographers to shoot for free for a press publication their first few times to grow their portfolio? Yes, absolutely. And there's absolutely, again, no shame in shooting for free at all. If your objective is to get paid, definitely, make sure that you're going through the venue promoter, the artist media channels, and that side of things. But if you're shooting as press, expect to shoot for free. And it's totally okay to do that, especially if you're building your portfolio. If you're reaching out to local artists, definitely try to see if you can get paid, but also, try to set your ego and your expectations aside. Just at the end of the day, don't feel like you have to do anything that's not necessarily like worth your time. How many deliverables feel standard for me as far as each of those categories? Ooh, okay. So going up here to our press venue promoter breakdown deliverables, that's a really good question. And that's, something that it varies per person, but I can tell you mine. For press, that's going to be an online photo gallery. So you're looking at about like 15 to 20 images. I wouldn't really go any higher than that because you start to lose people's interest as they scroll. And that's going to be photo only, no video. Typically, press passes, unless they specify otherwise, are not even going to allow video at the show. And just be respectful of that because you don't want to get caught like breaking the rules and then not, get another press pass the next time you want one. For venues and promoters, this is where discussing deliverables, comes in handy the first time around because you are shooting the whole night. You are going to have a lot more to work with. I would say, if you're taking photos of fans in the crowd, try to include at least like one photo from each set of people that you go up to. But otherwise, I would say for an entire night's worth of photography, you're looking at like at least 50 pictures turned in, if not more. I think I will usually promise 50 and then end up with like 100. And that's great because promoters will use that kind of stuff down the line because they want to then like market the venue itself after the show is over. And a lot of that content, especially people in the crowd, it's more evergreen. It has a longer shelf life. And then artist media, let's see here. Let me think about what mine are if I can remember them without pulling it up. I do a base, so it's 30 plus photos, so I guarantee at least 30. For the video side of things, I do 5 plus, and it's a mix of raw clips and iPhone video because iPhone content is on the up and up these days. So I will say you'll get 5 clips, but it could be 2 iPhone, 3 raw, and a lot of artists will come back and they'll ask me if I can do at least 10. And I say, yeah, no problem. Because when I'm shooting, I'll usually have at least 10 anyway. I just like to narrow it down to 5 because my focus really is photography. And then keeping that number low for me just like lets me focus on the job that I'm good at. So yeah. What are the websites that I would recommend to build a portfolio? Um, so I came from Wix, and Wix is really good for like customizability, if that's a word. I found that I was able to do a lot of things on Wix and didn't feel really limited, but the actual editing platform can be kind of clunky. And towards the end of me using Wix, it started to lag and have so many glitches, I think because my site was like so thick and like full of like, these high quality photos that like the backend platform just started to crash. So with my newest portfolio, I switched to Squarespace and I really like Squarespace a lot. I've also seen other ones, like Adobe Spark, I think is something that sounds right, but in any case, it's through Adobe. Um, but WordPress even, You can, I think that's better for blogs. I would really say look at Wix or Squarespace if you're doing like a mostly photo-based portfolio. Um, and with that said, like if you are building a portfolio, here's some tips. Um, I export, so I pull up all of my photos that I plan on putting in it in advance, and I export them so that the resolution is 72 DPI, which is like web quality resolution. And then I also reduce the size of the image pixel wise on the long end so that it's not any longer than I think 1500 pixels is what I set it to. And basically what that means is it's going to load up on your website faster, but it's also going to be so if someone tries to drag and drop and take one of your photos from your site, they're going to get a version of it that might look good on like your screen, but as soon as they blow it up any bigger, if they try to make it a poster or something, it's not going to look good. Favorite camera bag for on stage. Ooh, we're gonna talk about gear in another FemHouse session. But for now, I go back and forth. I have a front-loading sling bag for if I'm doing just a really basic night, I'm not planning on busting out all the stops, all the lenses, that sort of thing. And I love that little bag because I can walk through a crowd and have it worn on the front of me, and I feel really secure with all of my belongings. But if I am on stage, what I'll do is I have like a bigger case that I use to travel with my gear. And if the event is not going to be a very crowded situation, if I know there's going to be good security, I'll put the case behind a speaker and then it'll stay out of view, but I'll have everything on stage right there for me if I need it. Thanks for all the awesome info. You're welcome. I'm happy to be here and I'm happy that you guys are here. How much can you make on tour for shooting for an artist? That's a really, really good question. So, if you are looking at tour rates, what a lot of people do is they will take their single show rate and just multiply it by how many days on tour. And then you're going to add in a fee called a per diem, which means you like basically like your daily fee. So for every day that you're on the road, whether you're photographing or not, you are getting a small fee. It's usually like $50 to $75 just to be there. And that's going to cover your like, your foods, your Ubers, all of your basic daily existence sort of things. If you spend less than that daily, then profit, but depends on how long the tour is. So, I've seen people do tours anywhere from like $4,000 to $9,000. It really depends on the artist's per show budget. But if you do the math of just like per show days and do a rate per show and then have a per diem, you can get pretty close to those numbers. Thank you. You're welcome. I hope that this has helped you on your journey. Are all of the photos in the PowerPoint taken by me? Yes. Yes, they are. I had to put them in here. Um, just a little way to show you more about my work, but also, give you a point of reference for the kind of things that you can be doing if you pursue this. Do I negotiate usage contracts separately or are they within my costs? This is a great question. So with artist photography, you typically, when you are reaching out through a cold email, so you typically don't do a usage contract because there's this expectation that the photos are going to be used on social media. If it matters like very deeply to you, you can specify that these photos are for social media use only. Something that I do is if someone wants to take an image that I've taken, turn it into something that is maybe like merch, a poster, anything that's like directly like commercialized that they're making money off of it, we'll do a separate license aside from me actually shooting the content. A lot of the times too, if you shoot a festival or for a promoter, they're gonna have their own contract that they give to you that will say that they basically own the images, or that you are the owner, but they get to use them for whatever you want. And that's your turn. If you want to negotiate further, you can. But typically, if you're doing the cold email method, you won't have a contract. You can always write one up and send one, too. It's just not as common. Is there a replay of this that you guys can watch live? Yes, of course. I believe that this will be uploaded to the FemHouse YouTube, so you can stay tuned to our social media for when that drops. But other than that, I think that was our final question. And yeah, thank you guys so much for sticking around. I hope that this session has been informative and helpful. This is my first one, so hopefully I did okay. But yeah, feel free to reach out to me on social media if you have anything else after this. And if not, I will see you at the next one. Bye.